Nichols has fallen into the trap. He's lofted it down the throat of Ollie Robinson. Woody line works. Henry Nichols didn't play the shot very well. He was cramped for room. Henry Nichols falls for 61, a well-made 61 of 175 balls. Weren't sure where the breakthrough was coming from, but it has come.
So some people were in the studio in Salford, some people were in Broadcasting House, one or two went to the Oval. Jonathan Agnew stayed in his loft space in his house in Leicestershire, and I was in my loft space here in my house in southwest London.
In terms of describing Vista and setting the scene and bringing in all the different elements to the listener back home. Can't do that, can you, if you're sitting at a desk?
Last year, streaming was a money saver rather than a money gainer. It saved refunds. It saved, in terms of partners and sponsors. This year, it's a money driver. We will make money on live streaming this year.
I think most people have found a fairly simple way of it working. I think there's been a rush to develop and improve the technology that is making it happen. So provided you can plug a microphone into your laptop and provided you've got a webcam or whatever it might be, then the stream will come to you and we will hear you.
You can pretty much do what a TV channel can do with a £900 piece of software, a decent computer, a couple of cameras. When I was working in television, cameras were 100 grand, sound kit was thousands, and you had to get the tape out and edit the tape. It's just going to get easier and easier for people to produce stuff.
Why have we been doing this for years? I know technology's changed and stuff and cost and all that, but yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you could have done that all along.
It was just that sense of being on a freezing cold January day, watching the Indian Ocean lapping against a shore in Gaul, and trying to convey what was happening just from those pictures. And I think it kind of illustrated to me how very spoilt we are a lot of the time. That we do have that privileged position of going to a lot of live events, and I've covered many live events over the years. But you've got to try and create a sense of what it must feel like to be in that heat when it's freezing cold outside your window, or to feel the breeze that's getting the palm trees to wave beautifully on the beach. And it was a challenge. I was glad that we managed to do it to the extent that we did, but it's just conveying an atmosphere when you can't feel the atmosphere.
Going into that India series, I was concerned because, all the stories were suggesting it was going to be, 5-day test with Pujara batting out for 4 sessions. And what do you talk about when India are 550 for 3 and England have been bowled out for 118? And India is still going to be batting for another session and a half.
Sometimes the visuals that you're getting on screen are not that clear. It's pixelating. So you're not entirely sure of who the player is. And I think at that point, I've learned to change my prep slightly for doing some of these off-tube and remote comms, because I want to be able to talk about the team in generality a lot more, because sometimes I'm not going to have the specific detail on screen as clearly as I need to go, is that the 12 or the 13 they're showing me? I can't talk about how many caps he's got for his country if it's the wrong bloke.
My background is I was a sound engineer, trained as a sound engineer back in the 90s, worked in telly for 12, 13, 14, 15 years. When the pandemic hit, we'd moved on from just being an audio station on internet radio that we figured we could get bigger audiences on YouTube and Facebook. So then we had to have a visual thing. And then to do that, we had to buy broadcast software. So we bought Wirecast, which we'd always use in the studio to do our broadcasts. And then when the pandemic hit, it was a question of, can we get people into Wirecast to be able to broadcast out to the wider world without them all being in the same place?
Superficially you think, well, they're doing an incredible job, and the creativity that's gone into it, the technical hoops that we all had to jump through, and the way that our technical guys managed to set, not only having, the remote broadcasting boxes that we were working with and the microphones and everything like that, so we could broadcast from home, just by plugging the box into the broadband router, and then having the pictures which were all in sync. So having a way of getting the feed that was coming into the BBC building, which was then straight to our laptops, so we could get the pictures all synced up at the same time. So, you didn't have a situation where somebody was watching it on Sky and somebody was watching it on Sky but on their iPad. So, I know from watching cricket like that, you can get almost a whole over delay sometimes if you're trying to do it like that. But we were all watching the pictures at the same time. That was technically amazing.
If you're using Zoom and another bit of software that's broadcasting stuff, and it's all video and it's all at either 720p or 1080p, it chews the CPU basically. And what I found is the secondhand computer that we used, which was fine for doing stuff in the studio because we were just using a camera that was come in and there's not many graphics and there's not many transitions, then it could handle it. Home broadband setups, the actual upload speed on nearly all of them is jammed at sort of 19 megabytes per second. And each stream we do is 2 megabytes per second. Fortunately, this flat has optical cable straight to the flat, so I can get 60 megabytes upload. So we changed our broadband. That sorted that problem. But then the other problem that I found was that whilst using Zoom and Wirecast to do the broadcast, Zoom takes a lot of resources as well as the broadcast. And what it was doing was pushing the CPU up to 100%, and then we would just be dropping frames. I mean, there was one broadcast we must have lost. Over half of the broadcast was lost in drop frames. And that was suddenly a very big issue. And the only way to sort that was to actually get a new computer. And I presumed that we needed the top spec computer I could get, but we got COVID loan for $3,500, which we were entitled to. So that was great. And that allowed me to go out and buy a brand new MacBook Pro, which can handle it.
TalkSport had the rights for the South Africa-England limited over series that was cancelled halfway through. That taught us loads. That's where we learned how to do India. But, before then, and we needed that. It was really handy we did that series, actually, because that gave us an idea of just how much work needed to be done from a logistics perspective in terms of COVID, let alone editorially trying to commentate off the TV, as opposed to being there.
We started streaming back in 2017, and it was a very basic product. It was probably more of a webcam really than anything to be described as a genuine product. But I think at that point we didn't really know what the audience would be like, whether people would sit there and watch it, or whether people would be interested in taking it.
Everyone moans year on year about how many people turn up actually to watch cricket live, and no one gets to see county cricket and stuff, but they've taken control of that.
The change in media rights between Sky, counties and ECB changed at the end of 2019, allowing counties to utilise more cameras to turn essentially the stream from a webcam to a very basic TV style production was something that we were really keen to do at the beginning of 2020 in terms of TV production and post-production and directing, producing, those sort of skills were not necessarily part of anyone's armory, and we've had to kind of learn that on the job. The last time there was fans in the ground, our live stream was a laptop that just chugged away, and we kept an eye on it. And now we've got a studio and a in-house commentary box and cameras on the gantry and slow motion cameras and cameras around the ground.
There was that fear, I think, amongst many sports that, during the pandemic, where you couldn't go to the ground, or you could, that maybe people would get more into other sports or other activities, or just kind of cricket would fall out of their regular pattern. Giving all the different options really does help fans engage in however it suits them best. So that's really positive for the game.
We looked at doing a few ODIs in Scotland 2 years ago before the pandemic hit. Thankfully we didn't do them because they both rained off. But we looked at hiring, I think it was an 8-camera, multi-camera shoot setup. We were going to take our kit up there, and the whole thing would have cost us about 30 grand for, I think it was 3 ODIs that we could have put out live on YouTube. Now you think that's £10,000 a game. Now people might say that's expensive, but you look at the quality you could get with an 8-camera setup and a decent audio setup with 4 camera operators, 2 at either end doing the actual shots of the ground, and then some remote cameras taking wider shots from the outside, and then someone who's experienced at doing that job mixing it in a mobile van, you could get a really good product out for next to nothing. Now you put that on YouTube, where you're worldwide, you've got a potential audience of billions.
We had 3 million views on our stream in just the 8-week season that we hosted, and we're obviously hoping for a lot more than that this year. Now we're having conversations with partners and sponsors about, actually there might only be 2,000 people come back here in a few days' time, but you're still going to have 100,000, 200,000 eyeballs on the stream with your branding on, so that it's part of the value proposition that's changed.
I think the difference in live stream or watching something more traditional or linear in that sense is the what I call the kind of informality of it. I think, standard TV broadcasts are things that you tend to sit down, you'll have your dinner in front of, you're ready to sit in front of the TV. And although a lot of people will live stream through smart TVs, through YouTube, that kind of thing, I still think that actually there is more of an intimate relationship, an informal relationship. If it's via Facebook, it's YouTube, it's these kind of things. I think people are making more of an effort to personally bring it to their device, more likely than their TV, even though that technology is growing. It could be a student watching it on the bus on their way somewhere, or they're watching it in bed while they've got a TV on in the background. So I think you've got the opportunity to deliver commentary in a slightly different way.
It's obvious that it has opened it up, and I think, having spoken with the ECB, they are really pleased with the, I can't speak for them, but pleased with the numbers and those watching the county game and stuff. So it's got to be a good thing, right? And it will just be interesting to see how it moves forward.
The way that we had to address the COVID situation was by far, it took up probably 80% of our conversation in the lead up to the test series, which, a test series is there's so many different things that you need to sort out, but that was comfortably the most difficult.
There has been an appreciation of the work that's gone on, from the counties and from the ECB in terms of putting on that amount of cricket.
Guys and gals were coming in at like 4 a.m. And they needed to be fed. So how do you go about doing that? Do you let them go out at 6 o'clock? Well, they can't really, because there's not really enough time. So then you've got to get food in. But then how do you stop the food being, basically, like, is there a communal desk where people come out, or is food brought to the desk? And if the person bringing it to the desk, he's got to be, or she's got to be wearing gloves and
I have been to 11 Olympic Games, starting in Barcelona in 1992. And at the moment, it feels very odd not to be there. They said, do you want to do it in Tokyo, or do you want to do it in a studio in Salford? Knowing back in February just what the restrictions were going to be like, what the limits on daily life were going to be like. And having gone through that in the cricket bubble last year, I just thought, I don't think I could do it for 3 weeks in a country that I've never been to. And I was desperate to go to Japan. But yes, I'm going to be reporting on the gymnastics, commentating on a bit of the gymnastics as well, sitting in a room in Media City, looking at a TV screen.
There are very few broadcasters that want it shared that you're doing a remote commentary or something off tube. I have shared that at times in the past and been reprimanded for it. I also heard a great story about Nick Mullins and David Flatman being in a voiceover booth in Stratford at BT doing Junior World Championships, which was in Georgia, and it was about 36 degrees in Georgia, but it was also about 30 degrees in London, and in a not particularly well air-conditioned voiceover booth. And obviously Nick Mullins is doing the gently sensitive thing to be able to talk about, and of course it's a very hot day in Georgia. He's not saying here in Georgia, but he's in Georgia, and the player, and David Flatman was in the sort of booth next to him, and he was like, yes, Nick, I'm absolutely sweltering, and sort of allowing himself to get away with what he could get away with. It was absolutely true, but he was in an entirely different country.
People understand why we didn't have anyone in India. We weren't allowed to have anyone in India. And of course, COVID was raging here and there. That's fine. But a year or two from now, and a game gets called off, or a player gets injured, or there's a situation on the field, or whatever happens, you need somebody there. Partly as well, because it's not just about the commentary, is it anymore? It's about social media. It's about rolling news, sports news. If you're not there, then you can't report from where the story is.
I think inevitably we will travel less. That's probably good for the planet, and that's very important. And I think every responsible media organisation is considering that a lot of the time.
Are the people in charge of these competitions therefore paying, one fee for the one game that has been broadcast on one channel, or are they having to dilute that to get coverage across all of them? Probably a lot of the latter. And I think that's worrying at times, because you're then not respecting the work that's going in from a commentator or broadcaster working on that game. It's never just about the game. It's about the prep and the hours you're doing before. That's sort of what you're being respected in terms of a fee to do. You're then obviously being backed as an individual to, as we say, find the right lines at the right times and be a good commentator on the game.
We're certainly anticipating digital inventory probably outstripping physical inventory over the next 18 months in terms of assets, whether that be digital, social, live stream. I think there's every chance that we could see that outstretch some of our more traditional assets, which is exciting, because those are avenues that didn't exist 3 years ago.
The one block in all of this is that you're always using third-party places to broadcast, right? Each stream has bandwidth, so if you want to do it yourself, you'd have to pay someone an enormous amount of bandwidth to be able to get enough people to view it simultaneously. So you're stuck with the likes of YouTube or Facebook, because they've got the bandwidth to be able to do it, and therefore you have to negotiate with them as to how much money you make.
It is absolutely much more accessible, and that's what cricket needs. I mean, we can't be a sport that you have to be a member or pay a ticket price or pay for on TV, to be able to have any access to it, because then, it's not there's not a great future ahead, is there? So that's what cricket needs. It just needs to be as accessible as possible.
We would certainly anticipate there to be enough money in it to keep improving it for the fans, and that, I think that's the important thing, is that it's not going to be seen as a purely a cash cow. I think everything that we want to try and invest back into it, and we want to keep it free for the fans. We want to not completely fill it with advertisements every 10 minutes and stuff. So it will be a driver to try and get people interested in cricket and interested in Somerset and interested in county cricket. But I think it is sustainable. I really do.
The blockers on all these things are people's willingness to do them. It's never going to be technology and all that kind of stuff. If you've got the money and you've got the set up to start with, the questions then become, does people's will eventually wear out? I mean, ours hasn't, and we enjoy doing it. And I think if you go into these kinds of things with the idea is we're going to make it big and we're going to make loads of money and it's going to be really successful, that's probably the wrong way to go into it, because there's never any guarantee. And as the fact is that nearly everyone can do these things, the question is, are you going to be lucky enough, or are you going to be doing it long enough that people actually come along and invest in you and see what you're doing and enjoy it?
None of us could have predicted how things were going to unfold back in March last year, and that we would do so much from our bedrooms or from our remote studios. I think the danger is that it's not as rich an experience for the listener as it has been before. So if, for example, the Masters at Augusta is always done remotely from now on, that whoever, BBC or Sky or whoever decide not to fly commentators to Augusta, you're going to get a generation of commentators who don't know what it feels like to stand at Amen Corner and see the colours of the azaleas, or don't know what it feels like to sit on centre court at Wimbledon and almost feel like you can touch the players, because the commentary box that 5 Live have at Wimbledon is so close to the court, and you're on the same eye line as the players. And if you can't feel that, you can't help the audience feel it. And if you don't know what that feels like, then you can't really learn it from watching pictures or reading about it. So the power of the imagination is a great thing, but I don't think it should be what we are having to rely on all the time.
The remote side of things has made it more accessible for more people. I dare say over the last year, more commentators have probably had a shot at commentating than they ever have, because actually people have gone, well, hold on, if we've been forced to do it this way through discovering this technology or using it more, well, where else can we use it? And actually we can start bringing more of these games to viewers and things like that. So I think it's widened the marketplace having remote commentary, and more people are doing it. Whether you'll get to a world where you'll have people broadcasting from here and there, that might be the payoff.
I'm generally speaking an optimistic person. I think it will give us opportunities to cover things that we wouldn't have done in the past.
I think it's very viable, and I think you'll find in the future you'll find all sorts of little production companies just doing stuff online.
Thank you, Hendo. Thank you, Tony. Good start by New Zealand, continuing their fine work from yesterday. They are 276 for 3 in this first innings. We appear to have too many people on